I love America.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be an American, but I'm not proud of the system that we've set up, the monetary system that we've set up that exploits people and, you know, allows the rich to get richer at the expense of everybody else that's producing.
Do you think the price of gold and silver are manipulated, rigged? That's a subject of great debate and clouded in mystery and intrigue within the precious metals industry. Today, I'm joined by Stuart Englert. He has some answers for us. He wrote a book called Rigged, Exposing the Largest Financial Fraud in History. He's going to share some fascinating information with us.
So, Stuart, I think a question on everybody's mind: how much longer can this last? When will market forces prevail and the real price of silver and gold be realized? Now, I know you don't have a crystal ball. Did you have any thoughts? I think there was a chapter in your book where you discussed this. Do you care to elaborate at all for us?
Yeah, the last chapter is titled "The Fraud Will Fail." And if you study history, you know that no monetary system lasts forever. They change. The US dollar will not always be the world's reserve currency. It will evolve in, you know, the monetary system will evolve into something different, at least not a debt-based system. The dollar may survive, but it certainly, you know, can't be a debt-based system forever. All fiat currencies have eventually failed, and the fiat dollar will eventually fail as well. And we're seeing moves in that direction. We're seeing the dollar being challenged. And it's, you know, what did I read? The amount of reserve currencies held as dollars is diminishing, you know, and I think we're going to continue to see that with the depreciation of the dollar. That's why the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, to try and pay more people to hold dollars. Okay, that's why. Think about the Fed is in a box. The Federal Reserve is in a box. On one hand, it needs to defend the dollar. On the other hand, it wants to keep the economy strong, but it can't do both. By trying to shore up the dollar, it has to destroy the economy, send us into a recession. So it eventually will fail. When it will fail, I have no idea, Ron. I don't have a crystal ball, as you say. I'm not a prognosticator. Most of my predictions have come wrong, been proven wrong. So I stopped doing that. I just know, based on history, that eventually all monetary systems dies and they're replaced with something new.
Wow. Well, you know, we have something else in common, Stuart, because most all my predictions are wrong as well. So, but like you said, you know, I have a degree in accounting. I don't claim to be a financial wizard, but I understand debt. I understand math. I mean, if you just look at the amount of national debt that we have, the amount of money, I mean, mathematically, from that perspective, it just doesn't work long term. It just doesn't work without further debasement of the currency. And but when it happens, right? I mean, you know, I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago, when situation appeared much healthier than it even does today, and you told me that we would be where we are right now, I would have said, oh my gosh, it would have blown up by then. So who knows how long they can keep all the, I think a good analogy is like, you know, a juggler who's got 5 balls in the air and now he's got 7 balls in the air. You know, soon there might be 9 balls. At some point, you can't keep juggling, right? I mean, there's only so many balls they can continue to juggle.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, First Mining Gold. They're a Canadian gold developer with 2 world-class projects in Canada. They also have a handful of other projects. When you total up all the gold in their resources, it comes to over 12 million ounces. They're worth checking out. I'll put a link to the company's website in the description below.
The dollar's had a great run. I mean, the United States has got to live very well for decades. Since the 1970s, when the gold standard ended, the United States has been exporting dollars and debt and importing all kinds of manufactured goods and commodities from around the world. Okay, so we've been able, our monetary system has been able to exploit the world, if you will, but that's why we have a trade balance, and that's why some other countries are tired of being exploited, and they don't want to accept, our debt as readily as they used to. We have to strong arm them, if you will. We have to put sanctions on them and try to control the whole world, not only with our military, but with our currency system.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand, and we could talk about this for hours, I imagine, but let's just look at the petrodollar, right? That would essentially, when Kissinger went to, and correct me if I'm wrong, went to Saudi Arabia and said, you've got two choices, and they chose, well, we will from now on only sell oil in dollars. And the United States agreed to be allies with them and defend them. What that meant was they sent us a bunch of oil, right? We sent them dollars, but a lot of those dollars then came back because they bought a lot of US treasuries, which allowed the United States to rack up more debt, and for Americans, like you said, to enjoy a quality of life that was maybe beyond where it should have been for a number of years.
The United States has been living beyond its means, ever since we went out the gold standard. We used to produce things here. My grandfather worked in a woodworking factory up in Indiana, when we were an exporter, a major exporter. Okay. Yeah. Nowadays, we import way more than we export. And that can't continue. And you're right. You're right about the petrodollar. We set up a system that benefited the U.S. monetary system. It was dollars for oil, and we got the OPEC countries to live by it. And now there's question about the future of that too, because China is talking with Saudi Arabia now, and it'll be interesting to see that. And I think that's one of the reasons they want us to get off fossil fuels, right? Because if anything has backed the dollar since the 70s, it's been oil. Okay, because most oil globally was sold or traded in US dollars, and that made the dollar very strong without gold backing.
Let me ask you a question. Did we do the same thing with China over the last 15 years? We imported a bunch of their toys and things that are at Walmart, however you want to say it, right? And we paid them in dollars, and then for a long time, those dollars were then recycled back into the United States and formed. But that's all changing. And I want to throw this in too. And I'm not speaking for Stuart, but I think sometimes when we talk about these subjects, it can feel like we're not patriotic and we're being critical of our country. And that's for me. And I think I can maybe I'm speaking for you, but I'm talking about these subjects because I really do care about my country, and I really do care. I don't have to agree with everything that's going on, but I do care about my country. I care about, my twin 10-year-old daughters, the country they're going to live in the future, and I'm concerned, I guess, is the best way to say it. Does that make sense? I mean, it goes back to
absolutely. I love America. I'm proud to be American, but I'm not proud of the system that we've set up, the monetary system that we've set up that exploits people and, allows the rich to get richer at the expense of everybody else that's producing. I was a journalist for 30 years, and I always try to pursue the truth. And that's what we've been missing. We haven't been pursuing the truth. We've been living a monetary lie for a long time, trading these increasingly worthless dollars for consumer goods and commodities from around the world. And it can't go on forever. All great things have to come to an end. And the question, what are we going to transition to?
Yeah.
Are we going to go back to the Constitution and try and have sound and honest money again? Or are we going to set up another debt-based fiat system that, you know, exploits the poor and the producers and allows the rich fat cats to get even richer, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think if you just take a quick look at wealth, the word is escaping me, wealth distribution, which isn't the word I'm looking for, but nonetheless, in our country, yeah, I mean, you know, the top 1%, the top 1/10 of 1%, it's astounding where the system has been, for lack of a better word, perverted, I think, from what the founding fathers envisioned. And not only that, but from what transpired from there, what really did make America such a wonderful, strong, top tier country. It's kind of to me feels like the country's been pillaged a little bit over the last 50 years, and at the expense of, in a lot of ways, let's say the middle class in the United States even, but also with a lot of working class, good people throughout the world.
Well, you know, I'm working on another book on debt. Okay. I keep asking myself, where does all this debt come from? And how does it undermine our currency system? And what I discovered is that our country was conceived in debt. I don't know if you know this, but going back to the revolution, money was borrowed from France to finance the Revolutionary War against Great Britain. Okay. And what I've concluded is the problem occurs when the government gets in cahoots, if you will, and conspires with the bankers and the financiers and the money lenders, okay? Because the financiers want to exploit the governments, okay, and get rich through war, right? And we've seen this recurring. But the debt in the United States has been increasing essentially since the founding, minus the time in 1836, President Andrew Jackson, he disliked the bankers. He did not like them. He called them a den of vipers and snakes, okay? And he was the first one that reduced the size of government, reduced the spending, got us back on a sound monetary system, and liquidated the nation's debt, okay?
Right.
And then guess what? A new war starts up, right? And so the country goes back in debt. And we see that throughout history, not just the United States.
Yeah.
Countries go in debt, fight these wars, and then they're beholden to their lender, to the banks.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's what we have going on. Every time we have a war, we go farther in debt, whether it was the Civil War, First World War, Second World War, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, Afghanistan, Iraq, and now it looks like, you know, we're on the doorstep of possibly another war. You know, there's a whole lot of saber rattling going on right now, and we're funding a war in Ukraine.
So when we look at the most recent figure I've read about total world debt right now is like $300 trillion. And, you know, I'm not necessarily, I like Ray Dalio, but I watched something that Ray Dalio put out about, you know, kind of the rise and fall of different empires. And then he touched on this idea of debt. And, you know, it's so important to remember that's $300 trillion. That's a lot of little pieces of debt. Everybody wants to be paid back, right? That actually means somebody owes somebody. And I forget how he phrased it or put it, but it's like, everybody thinks they're going to get their money back. And that doesn't even factor in the 2 quadrillion or 3 quadrillion of derivatives that are piled up on top of that, these, which are kind of like debt insurance instruments between the big banks, that it's just incredible. Like the world could never pay its debt back. And it's just, you know, very scary and interesting. I'll put it that way.
It's a huge debt pyramid, and we keep building it, and at some part it's got to come crumbling down.
Right.
And by the way, I've heard financial derivatives described as debt used as collateral to take on more debt, And that's exactly what they've done in the precious metals market, getting back to precious metals.
Yeah, yeah.
They're pyramided. So you have an underlying amount of physical gold and silver. And what they've done with these paper derivatives and contracts is lever it up. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have this huge mountain of financial derivatives backed by a very small amount of physical metal.
Yeah. So for this 10-ounce silver bar, for instance, there may be 400 or 4,000, because I hear it's 400 to 1 a lot of times, claims on this if this is in the if this is actually in the vaults at the COMEX or the LBMA.
Yes,
Yeah.
hundreds. It's been levered up hundreds of times.
Hundreds
Absolutely.
and hundreds of times. Very
And
interesting.
more paper metal is traded on the COMEX in a few days than is mined in an entire year. And that's
Right.
that's how they control the price. Okay.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
trading these paper contracts back and forth and back and forth. Okay. That's how they take the price.
Crazy, crazy. Hey, before I forget, my channel is sponsored by a company called First Mining Gold. The chairman of First Mining Gold is a gentleman named Keith Neumeyer. I noticed you mentioned him in your book. Any thoughts on Keith Neumeyer? I have a lot of respect for him. I know you didn't dedicate a lot of your book to Keith Neumeyer, but he's generally, I think, viewed in the silver community in particular as somebody who's willing, from a CEO perspective, probably the leader in terms of being willing to speak up and say, hey, there's a lot of monkey business that goes on in the metals markets. Is that your impression of him as well?
Yes. One of the reasons I mentioned him in the book was because it's so rare for a CEO of a precious metals company, mining company, to come out publicly and state that there is manipulation in the precious metal markets.
Yeah.
And he's a rarity. There have only been a few that have come out and mention it. For the most part, these CEOs are very conservative. They don't want to bring a lot of attention to their companies or controversy. And so they generally avoid the subject. And I mentioned this in the book too. There's a couple reasons for that. First of all, these mining companies are regulated by governments. Okay, they have to go through these huge permitting processes. They have to jump through all these environmental hoops, if you will, to get their permits to even do mining. And then where do they get their financing to build these mines from? They get it from the banks that are manipulating the price. So, they don't want to get sideways, if you will, with the people that are regulating them and financing their ventures. So they generally don't discuss price manipulation, even though it would be in their best interest, if you will, to come forward and mention it like Keith Neumeyer does. And he, like I said, he's a rarity, and that's why I included some of his quotes in the book.
And I appreciate you sharing those 2 points, governments and the banks. I never thought of that before as to why most of the big mining companies just go along with the program. And Keith, I look at as being really brave and willing to speak up. He did an interview recently, I think it was down in Fort Lauderdale at the BMO conference with Kitco. And I think he's mentioned this before, but he said, hey, I've tried, but what he'd like to see is like almost a co-op between the mining companies where they, since there's not that much silver out there, it's I think a $16 billion market per year, where they kind of control selling the silver to the end market, to the Sonys, to the Teslas, to the people that are out there. I thought that was interesting, an interesting idea, an interesting proposition.
Right.
But will it ever happen?
I also mentioned in the book that, there was a lawsuit a number of years ago that revealed that Barrick, which is one of the largest mining companies, was in cahoots with JP Morgan, and
Right.
that lawsuit, you might remember, was ultimately dismissed. But it shows that some of these mining companies may actually be, contributing to the suppression of the metals.
Right. Stuart, thank you. I could go on, things are but I think I'd like to thank you for joining me on behalf of myself and also my viewers. This has been great. I want to remind everybody, the book is Rigged: Exposing the Largest Financial Fraud in History. I want to make sure I got that right. You can get it on Amazon. If I remember correctly, when I looked, you had almost 200 reviews, very, very highly reviewed book. Anything else you'd like to add, Stuart, before we wrap up?
Well, I think people need to educate themselves on this subject. If you're concerned about your financial security and future and preserving your wealth, you need to know what's going on with the monetary system. You need to know that not everybody's thinking has your best interest in mind. And so you have to do that yourself. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, so that average people can get some insights into the history of this subject, and also what's continuing to go on now in our financial system.
Sounds good. Can we talk again sometime in the future? I've really enjoyed this.
I hope we can. It's been great being in the basement, Ron, and I hope you have a great day.
Well, wait, before you say that, I forgot to mention, you said this earlier. This is the basement. It's a den of vipers, and what was that again?
Vipers and thieves is what Andrew Jackson called the bank. Yeah.
This is my new den of vipers and thieves, and you're welcome here anytime, my friend. You have a great day, and I want to say one more time on behalf of all the viewers, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. Take good care.
See you soon.
All right.